everybody see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're finishing up lesson 1, last part of lesson 1 today is the plan. There's really not very much to do with lesson 1. If you've kind of looked at the reading material or the lecture today, the slides, you'll notice that it's really just a bunch of links to resources, online resources that are available. Is mostly that. So we'll go through that and kind of look at those. But there won't be too much to do with that. I finally got around to going through your Unit 0 labs. So I posted grades for those. I can give you more specifics next week when we're in class. I kind of want to meet with everybody individually and kind of go through your problems, in particular the things that I noticed. One thing I noticed kind of as a trend with the Unit 0 labs, I noticed that there are a number of places that I think that the lab assignment was not clear what I was asking for. So one of the things that I'm going to do there, I've gone and pushed out an updated version of the worksheet, which has some more clarification on it. And I've also pushed the due date on that. I've extended the due date on the Unit 0 labs all the way to February 1st. So that'll give you a chance to turn those in again. Cool.
Sweet. Thank you.
Fantastic.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
So I have a random question. Are all the homework assignments that we're gonna have on Inside Ranken?
Yes, they should be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all the homework assignments
So,
are there and online.
I mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, it's probably not a problem if we get to redo these. I just realized that like all the other homework assignments totaled up is only like 150, and the 0 lab was 100 points. So that was like almost 50%, or a little over actually, 50% of the entire homework grade.
So if you're looking at, if we go back and look at the syllabus, get back to the right place here. So if we go back and look at the syllabus, first of all, you want lab and homework are not the same. So if you look at the rubric, here it is. Okay, so the homework quizzes, which are in Inside Ranken, those are 10% of your final grade. Labs are separate, and they are 20% of your grade. So the homework and the labs are a separate part of your grade mix. Okay. Same with perusal. Perusal is split off now as a separate part. Does that help, Sheridan? First of all, does that you kind of understand that?
So are you saying like the quizzes that we? Are you saying like the quizzes that we take on Inside Ranken are different from the labs?
Correct. They're not the same part of your grade.
Yeah.
You're cutting off. I think you let your push to talk key go before you finish talking. So this is up there. I put a note on there to just remind you, please submit those as, problem 1, problem 2. I went ahead and graded them as you turn them in, but I would ask if you're going to resubmit it, please update the project naming to fit that specific naming scheme, should you resubmit it. But I graded them as taking your naming scheme that you had. One of the biggest things that I saw with problems, specifically problems 11 through 25, is that I really expected you to not use anything that's built in. So like there's built-in functionalities to find the maximum, to reverse things, to find if a list contains something, or and such. that I was asking you, or to combine lists, put them together, or to sort things. I don't want you to use any of those pre-built methods, because actually the whole part of the assignment of what I'm asking for in these problems is actually to do the problem solving of how do you implement that method. So that you're putting into use, things with for loops and just thinking about the logic of it. That's what I'm looking for, just to be clear, with problems 11 through 25. So if you're using one of the collections methods in there, like collections.sort and such, collections.max, recognize that I didn't give you full credit on that problem. Okay? Which is, and I should have specified that in the assignment, and that's part of why I'm extending the due date, is because I that just wasn't clear. Cool.
Got it.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep,
Sorry,
I can
my
hear you
Wi-Fi
now.
crashed.
I can hear you now.
So my actual thing, so when you look at the labs, how all the lab grades are there, lesson 1 through 10, and then the 0, my thing is like, it's not really a thing, but like, it's not a concern, I guess, but like, I realized that lab 0 was 100 points, but all the labs total together without that one is only 150 points. So that 0 labs like 50% of that 20.
Which is not actually true, because each of the labs are weighted equally. They're not weighted by those point numbers.
Oh, okay. I was thinking
Yeah.
it was like total together at the end. That's why I was like...
Yeah, there's two options in Inside Ranken. I can either combine the labs and have each of the labs worth a certain number of points, but my intent has been that every lab should be weighted by the same percentage. So like the labs for lesson 1 are the same weight as the unit 0 labs. So that may be something I just need to change the points, go back in and change the points so that each of them are 100. But the intent was that every of those lab assignments are all weighted the same.
Okay, no, I just thought it was like point-wise, and I was like, I mean, where it stands now, that's not gonna, that's not looking well.
Yeah, no, let me pull it up. Let me pull it up real quick so you can kind of see what it looks like on my back end. Final grade weighting lab. So, from my perspective, I've weighted this whole section, labs, as 20%, and you can see here assignments are weighted equally. So in the end, each of these labs is 11.1% of the labs, or 2.2% of your final grade.
Got it. Okay.
What I haven't gone back and do, and sometimes I do this to help clarify, is just to make each of these labs 100, so that it looks more normal. But realistically, just know that they're all weighted the same. So.
Okay, that's what my concern was really about, was like the I guess the equality of the grading point of that. Like, it was almost 50% more than everything else. So
that's just a matter of I hadn't gone and like, don't look at the points for that section. It's what you want to look at is just the percentage. So like 50% is 50% of that is 50% across the board. So
with the grade that's posted for the console programs now, I mean, I see that it's there, but like, if I'm going to focus on this between now and the 1st of February, how do I know where to do that?
Yeah, I can give you the specific problems where I marked off points, but I want to go through that with everybody on Tuesday.
Oh, okay. All right, you said that. I'm sorry.
I really want to go with over that with people one-on-one.
Right.
So and that's the other reason I pushed the due date all the way out to February, so that there's some room for us to actually sit down and talk through them. So. That's the plan. Yeah. So that looks like it's 100 points. It looks like it's a lot of weight. That's not what's actually happening there.
Okay. And the Code Wars, that's extra credit, right? Is there a due date on that? I mean, turn that in before the end of the class? I mean, get 'em in May or?
The due date has already passed. The due date for
Okay.
that I'm not extending. Um, if you want to, if I put a 0 on there, it's because I didn't get connected with you on Code Wars. So if you have a 0 there, but you did some of the work on Code Wars, I just need to know your username on Code Wars so I can go and look at what ones you actually completed. So I'm missing that, I think, for a few people is it didn't automatically set you to be following me or me following you. So all I need is your username on Code Wars, and I'll go recheck it.
All right, not applicable here.
Yeah.
For the setting up environment,
Yep.
you only sent 2 pictures for the what we have and didn't have.
Yep.
So I don't know why I'm getting the grade I am, because I thought I turned everything in. I thought I sent all the screenshots.
I am aware that those are incorrect. I know that those are not right. What I put in there is what I have on my, based on what I have on my check sheet at the moment. That's something I'd like to get with people and fix. But that's, yeah, those are, I know that those grades for the check sheet are not correct for the setup steps.
And I kind of feel like if we're missing something, like there's no way of knowing before the grade was due.
That is an issue. Really, the only thing I can say there is the best thing for you to do is get in touch with me on a regular basis, and so we can look at stuff. It's the other reason. That's one of the reasons I pushed things. I've extended the due date on those back to January 1st. Was for those console labs was that just I didn't feel like I got feedback to you when I wanted to, when I needed to, if that makes sense. So, yeah, that's been a recurring issue, and that's actually part of why I've been working on that Note app to send me notifications when you push up code, is to try and alleviate some issues there, because there's a lot of issues on my end in terms of getting you feedback as soon as I really need to. Is that cool? So that's kind of a work in progress, but there's, yeah. So the biggest thing I would say there is touch base with me on a regular basis, to kind of look at where you're at with those labs. Cool. Because I do know that there were only a few people that actually contacted me and kind of had me take a look at the labs, the Unit 0 labs, before they were submitted. So, any questions on that before we get into the slides and such for today?
Yeah. Well, one question with perusal in the videos and the ones with the Google ones.
Yep.
Do we need to comment on those or not?
That had been originally my vision, and I think my vision for that has changed a few times. I think what I'm going to do, and you'll notice that I went ahead and marked the ones for lesson 2 as optional. That originally had been my expectation, and if you look at what it says on Inside Ranken in terms of that perusal assignment, you'll see that included. So let me pop over to Inside Ranken.
For me, when it comes to that, I feel like if we go over it in class, I don't think I should have to rewatch the video to get the points for it.
Right. And I think originally my plan had been that you would watch the video outside of class and do something what we call, I forget the term, but Oh, flipping across from, that's the term. So my original thought had been that we were going to do that, and then as I kind of was prepping the semester and making my plans, I changed my mind, but I didn't go back and really reevaluate the grading. So what I'm going to be doing, I think, is I'm going to actually just drop the sections for the videos. So right now, what I have on Inside Rankin is I have a line item for the videos and a line item for the reading. But I think I'm going to drop all those line items for the videos. Is that cool?
On all of the
Yeah.
videos?
On the videos here. So all you'll see here, let me actually just go do that here for lesson 1.
Oh, that's good. That should bring grades up right away. The ones we should watch or comment on,
Mm-hmm.
those could be marked as, or the ones we shouldn't, but it's there. It's like enrichment, or take a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like would be optional. That's very clear because last night it was like 10:30, and I'm like, man, I got 3 videos to watch in a document.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's that's a lot.
The problem with the optional thing on Perusal is that it does a number of things. So one of the things that it does, first of all, it just gives you that optional word that shows up, but it also doesn't allow me. It then doesn't calculate grades in the grade book either. So sometimes I've left those on just to try and still see some feedback and some monitoring thing, because it still turns some things on for me that it doesn't otherwise. So yes, I will probably be going and changing all those videos to optional, but just recognize that sometimes it's a little bit more than that, because unfortunately it does more than just putting that label optional on it.
Okay, cool. You're probably gonna do it, or you're definitely gonna do it.
I am planning
There's a lawyer
to.
talking here.
I am planning to go mark all those videos as optional. It's just a lot of things to change, because unfortunately I have to change it one by one. There's no mass update option for me to go change everything to optional, which is a big pet peeve, because it's like, well, it's a lot of things. It's a lot of clicks to go change just one thing to optional. Unfortunately.
Okay.
I wish that was a lot easier to change. That's always the problem on my end is there's a lot of things between just the different systems that we use that there's a lot of just painstaking work that I have to do to get things transferred around. And I wish there were solutions for that, but mass data entry has been a problem. So yeah. So in terms of Inside Rankin, that's my plan. Is if we're with dropping the videos and because we were kind of doing the lessons and going over the slides in class, I'm not going to include those on the Perusal grades. It'll just be the reading material. Is that cool?
Yeah, that'll save up some time for sure.
Because I think that in the other thing that I've seen is I think that most of the discussion and most of the constructive discussion is happening on the text. So that's great. That's where I'd like to see it the most is on the text anyway. So if that's where all the discussion's happening, then there's no reason for me to be looking at comments on the videos and the slides as well.
Yeah, I like that you sort of sparked a discussion with a comment like, hey, what about this, or how would you do this? Because that just, it's thought-provoking, and it makes it easier for us to do what we need to do. Yeah.
Oh, on that topic, there were 2 that I pointed out, but I kind of put in the question pretty late. But I did want to point out because I didn't think there's maybe enough discussion on it. And I don't think that I touched on it enough in lecture yesterday. One of the things that I mentioned is that, hey, there is the horizontal scroll view that you can use in Android. It's basically an anti-pattern. You never want to use it in terms of UX because horizontal scrolling is generally a frowned upon thing. Again, there are occasionally reasons to use it, but generally not. I think, Paul, you had brought up one question about PDF readers who usually have some horizontal scrolling in there.
Yeah, not the same kind we're talking about.
And so, in fact, they kind of do most PDF readers. In fact, if you think about Google Maps, right? Google Maps, you can kind of scroll left and right and up and down. You can kind of scroll it in both directions. However, anytime that you have that, it's actually using what we call pan and pinch gestures. Pan is kind of where you're moving it around. Pinch is where you're pushing your fingers in and out to zoom in and zoom out. Those gestures actually don't work with either scroll view or horizontal scroll view. Those gestures are actually not there, especially in two-dimensional space with either of those two controls. So actually, any of those things, typically where you see horizontal scrolling, you're actually seeing pan and pinch gestures that are usually done with a custom control. You actually don't get to really support scrolling in both directions. You actually typically have to make your own control, your own view to support that. Cool.
Yep.
So that being said, there is sometimes you will see something where you're kind of semi-scrolling horizontally, but you're not actually. It's not necessarily freeform. It's maybe constrained. So a lot of times, what we use instead of horizontal scrolling. If it's really like a map or a PDF reader, you would actually implement panning and zooming. But if it's most of your UI, what we actually use instead is tabs and tab groups. So you have a tab thing up at the top, and then you can switch between tabs just by swiping the screen left or right. The catch there is you're never halfway in the middle of a tab. That's the difference. Cool. So what I was looking for there, as far as what you could use instead, tabs is actually a common thing that we use in place of horizontal scrolling.
So, I mean, we probably can, but like, if we miss a day of going to perusal, is it one day opportunity, at least for like this week, how you used to have it set up, like each day we go over a new topic, and at the end of the day it's due. Are we not allowed to go back and like make those points up? Like if I because I completely forgot yesterday. If I go back today, put comments, will it still count or no?
The way it's set up in perusal, you can comment up to a week after the due date. It does have a little bit of a grade penalty for doing it late, but you can comment up to a week after the due date.
Does that reflect onto Inside Ranken, like the grade penalty and everything? So
it will reflect onto perusal. I have to go take anytime I want to get grades from perusal to Inside Ranken, I have to do it manually. There is no automatic transfer of grades between the two. So that's something I have to do entirely myself.
Got it. So we can still go back and do it. It just might be a little bit of a deduction for late.
Yeah, it just may be a little bit of a deduction for late. I think usually people who have comment or missed the deadline, I think have still easily achieved a 3+. You just might not be able to get a 4+ if you're a day late, but you can definitely get a 3+ if you're a few days late.
Got it.
So, so there is a little bit of deduction in there, but that's open there. And part of why I have those, the windows as short as that is to try and kind of help and delineate, what are we covering on different days. Obviously, this week we're kind of doing a lesson per day. If you're looking at the calendar for the next upcoming weeks, our more norm once we get into lesson 2 is more like a lesson every other day. So we'll slow down a little bit, and rather than trying to cram, we crammed a bit into this week, but because all of it's short, we'll only be doing, as you can kind of see, 3 lessons next week. spread out over 5 days. On the question of homework, by the way, if you're looking at inside Ranken, you will notice that there is a homework assignment that is due today. There's a quiz, and there's a quiz that I've put in for at the end of every lesson. So there's one for lesson 1, one for lesson 2, one for lesson 3. So if you look into the homework questions here, does everybody see this? Homework questions, lesson 1.
Yeah, it's actually due Sunday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one thing I'd recommend you do today. The way this is kind of structured, you'll see there's a lesson 1.1, lesson 1.2, lesson 1.3. There's questions from each of those lessons, and these are actually pulled from. If you're looking at all the code labs, there's a last kind of tab, homework questions. Those are actually pulled from there. So those quizzes you see on Inside Ranken are actually pulled from the code labs for the most part. Any questions on that? Those are all, I think, multiple choice for the most part. So going back to the material for today. So as I kind of mentioned already, there's not a whole lot in lesson 1.4. So don't be disappointed in that front. There's the big thing on the slides is just really what's on the slides is just a bunch of links to online resources that are available for you to use to learn more about Android. A lot of these resources on this list are more towards like things that you might want to look at after you graduate, after you're finished with this course, as kind of continuing opportunities. I'd honestly say that a lot of things on this 1.4 that they link to, a lot of those are really not, probably not going to help you today, because they're more meant for professional developers. Okay? Everybody following with me there?
Got it.
So just, that's a heads up. Another heads up, the lab that we're gonna go through today really has nothing to do with the slides. So we'll get to the lab and we'll look at that. And I'd say the stuff we'll look at in the lab, we're going to look at just 3 things, but none of those 3 things are actually here in the slides or the reading material. So as far as what's in here, there's links to talking about documentation and where you can find that. Tutorials, blogs, videos, Udacity, where you can get the source code for the practicals. So the biggest place to find documentation on Android, official documentation, and this is kind of the place you want to keep bookmarked, is developer.android.com. So this is maintained by Google. This is where they put all of the latest and greatest stuff. If you need to know anything about how Android works or any part of Android, this is the best place to start. So for instance, if we want to say, well, let's maybe find out about scroll view, I could go put that in the search box and it'll kind of bring up what is available there. So we've got the first thing that appears is the API docs for there, because hey, it's a class, so that'll tell you a lot of things about it. It'll also point you to, for instance, even it points you to the code lab that we just did yesterday. So you can get to a lot of the resources that are available just by doing a quick search on developer.android.com. So that's this is probably a good place for you to bookmark. There's definitely things right now that will totally in there will totally apply to what we're doing. This is probably one of the more beginner friendly places to start, because there's a wide range of things available on there. They do mention here that the document structure looks like this: design, develop, distribute. If you're looking at this and then you're looking at this, you probably notice that the website's does not look like that. So the Android developer website's gone through just a major overhaul in just the past year or two. So where things are is quite a bit different. So it's not organized like that anymore, where it's design, develop, and distribute. A lot of those resources are still available, but more than likely you're going to have to just do a search and go find them. They're not in the menu like that anymore.
Hey, Mr. Smith, I got a general question.
Yep.
Okay. When you looked that up on that website, you mentioned something about API. Now, when I think of an API, I know what it stands for, right? But I think of it in the context of Node and the separate file we kept. APIs for create, read, delete, edit. I think of it as sort of like a universal application that we use. How is it different with this?
Yeah.
As compared to Node.
So let's backtrack a little bit. So first of all, what does API stand for? Because it's an acronym. It stands for Application Programming Interface. And I would definitely write that down. API is short for Application Programming Interface. The problem is API actually means 5 different things. It doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. And part of the problem there, API is not a new term. API actually predates the internet. So if you were to go back to the world of C and even the earliest programmers, they were still talking about APIs back then. If you go back to the 70s and the 80s, you'll still find literature in the 70s and 80s about APIs, and potentially even all the way back to the 60s and the Unix days. You'll find this idea of API because it has evolved and kind of changed over time. And so the problem is that there are actually people are still using multiple versions, multiple interpretations of that term. That's probably the part that is most confusing, and it's still confusing to me because anytime somebody says API, it can be really hard to dig through and understand what kind of API are they talking about. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the first thing you have to understand is the API does not mean the same thing to everybody. Okay. So let's backtrack and you kind of think about the term application programming interface. From that, it's basically anything that somebody else has written that you can write code against. That's the kind of the broad terminology. An API is code or something of some sort, some code that somebody else has written that you can use in your own program.
So a plugin for Android Studio would be considered an API?
No, it would still be a plugin. It has to be specifically like part of your program depends on it. If you're just using it to write your code, which most plugins in like Android Studio or IntelliJ, your plugin is just something you're using to make your code and your development easier. At the end of the day, your program doesn't depend on that plugin, right? So, if I run it on the Android device, does the Android device have access to that plugin? Well, obviously not, right? So it's only an API if it's still there at the point when your application is actually running. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just meant in terms of, say you're the developer for Android Studio, then that would be an API.
Yeah. So the earliest versions of API are more commonly known now today as libraries, actually. So the original definition of an API is a set of functions. An API is a set of functions that somebody else has written that you can use. That's the original definition of an API. With me so far?
Yeah.
So that and that was fine when that was all we had. When really all we had to break down when we broke down our code and we said, we have functions, that was the lowest level. When object-oriented programming came onto the scene, we looked at that and we said, well, maybe that's not a good definition anymore. Maybe that an API is a set of functions isn't really, doesn't really encompass the world of today. So API kind of expanded, and now we say, we said, okay, well, an API is any collection of functions and objects and classes that somebody else has written that I can use in my program, right? So we had to incorporate classes into the definition of an API. With me so far?
Yes.
Another thing that happened then, and so, kind of in that space, originally what we would, those were basically libraries, a collection of classes and functions that somebody else has written. When we built our applications, we would then typically compile those in. Those would actually become part of the EXE that we would then deliver to customers. So all of that code that somebody else has written was actually baked in to our program, and that started to make our programs bigger and bigger. So we started to have to break things off into things like DLLs, short for dynamically linked libraries. So that's code that kind of ships with your operating system or your drivers and whatnot. And so when your program runs, that code's not actually part of the executing program, but it's still used. So for instance, if you want to use DirectX to make a game, there's some DirectX DLLs that your program has to talk to, but DirectX is not actually part of your game. Your game's using DirectX, but it's not part of it. But that's still DirectX is still an API. Same thing with OpenGL is also an API. So there's a lot of different kinds of APIs there. There's also functions that are built in and things that are built into the operating system to deal with files or deal with drivers and all these kind of things. And those also have kind of APIs associated with them. So, you can kind of hear the term libraries and frameworks and APIs, and actually they're basically all the same thing when we're talking about those. Kind of in general. So that's kind of where that started. And then we had additional things like RPC, remote procedure call, where then we started to have these like, well, okay, I want to not just be able to call a function in my program, but I want to be able to call a function in some other program that's running. So to use that, I would use RPC, so I could call a function in another program. And it kind of would look like, at least to my program, as if it was a function in my program. And then that meant that you had APIs representing other programs that you were calling from your program. Okay? And this is all before the internet, right? So far, we haven't even made it up to the internet. So then with the advent of the internet and recent developments in the past 10 years, we got to the point where we're now connecting web applications to other web applications. So conceptually, you can think of to be more precise, a web API, that's what we were building last semester with Node, is web APIs. That's where, it was your /API was the start of that path, and it generally would receive and return JSON objects, and you were testing it with Postman. That's what we commonly refer to as a web API. You can think of it as just a bunch of functions in some other application that you can call, right? It's those API endpoints, we think about them actually as functions. So it's still kind of, that's kind of where that originate is all those API endpoints are conceptually a group of functions. You with me?
Yeah. So in context of what we're doing now, the import stuff, when we type import Java, util, whatever, that's the API. That's what we're bringing in.
You're bringing in the Java and the Android APIs.
Which is web. It lives in the web.
No, it lives on the device. It lives on the device. That's the definition of API, where an API is a collection of functions and classes.
Okay.
So when we're talking about the Android API, we're talking about a collections of functions and classes that are built and bundled with Android. So we're not talking about a web API, which is a bunch of like URLs and paths that you can ask for resources or pass resources in and such. So it's not the same definition of an API that we were dealing with in Node. Okay. Although we'll get to that definition of API later, because I'd like to get to the point where we can integrate web APIs with our Android applications. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the roundabout. Unfortunately, that's a problem in terms, is that API just doesn't mean the same thing to everybody. So it's again, the overall definition of API, it's code that's written by somebody else that you can use in your own program. It's just the way that you connect. There's 50 different ways to connect to an API based on what kind of API it is. Stack Overflow, there are some options. I'm quite sure you know that and familiar with Stack Overflow, so I won't go deep into that. There is a blog that Android puts out. There's actually 2 of these listed: Android Developers Blogspot.com, Android Google Blog.com. Those are interesting. They're helpful if you want to get news about the newest cutting edge things that are coming down the pipe from Android, or some of the new tutorials that they put out related to MAD, Modern Application Development. You can get that there. Probably, though, these blogs are not going to be relevant to what we're doing this semester, because they're more meant for people that already know Android. Cool. There is also the Android Developers YouTube channel, so you can find a bunch of tutorials and videos out there. Do note that there's a lot more than just some of the ones that we've shown you, and there are some newer videos. So this is the Android Developers channel, per se. The ones that were, interestingly enough, the ones that were recorded and put up for this class are not actually on the Android Developers channel. They're actually on the Android Developers India channel. Surprise, surprise. They never actually recorded an English version of that, an American version of it, and put it onto the main Android Developers channel. Next up, you can find the Code Labs. What we're doing this semester is actually a very small subset of all the Code Labs that are available. So if you go to codelabsdevelopers.google.com, you're going to see everything, all the Code Labs that are available. And in fact, there's a lot of things out there that aren't just Android. So there's, for this instance, this one, you can kind of see there's this icon down in the bottom. This is actually a web Code Lab. So there's actually Code Labs out there for a lot of other technologies that Google touches. So if you want to go in here and look specifically, filter down Android, well, you go and pick Android there, and then that'll show you everything that they have. Now, all the labs that we're doing this semester are in this list, but there are much more available. There's much more available out there than what we have a chance to cover in this semester.
I saw that it said Android there and then Android TV. I guess, is there a different entire system for TV-based Android systems?
Android TV is kind of an interesting world. And honestly, I think I saw a news story just a few weeks ago that I think Android TV is dying. I think that I feel like if I remember right, I saw something saying that Google was actually shutting down Android TV as a thing.
Okay, I guess just Apple TV's probably become the dominant.
No, actually, decided to go for Chromecast instead of Android TV.
Awesome.
That's what if I remember right, that was the story. Is they decided that Android TV was really a bust, and because the idea with Android TV was to actually run Android apps that are actually running on a TV, but it actually was a separate Play Store. So you have your Play Store for like your Android phones and tablets, and you have a separate Play Store for Android TV. Was what it was. So they've decided to, as I understand it, they've decided to shut that down in favor of maintaining Chromecast because, well, people are using Chromecast more than buying devices because you have to actually buy an Android TV kind of thing device.
Yeah.
So I would not worry about that because that's going away. There's also some classes on Udemy, and this falls into the area of things that you might want to do after you graduate, but would be beyond the scope of this semester. But there are some courses on Udacity about Android as well. But that's not really going to be your go-to this semester. Again, the biggest thing the thing I would bookmark and save is this one right at the top, is developer.android.com. That's where you'll find basically everything that's going to be interesting to you this semester. It's going to help you. There's also, again, this is actually part of still developer.google.com. There is a list of there's this glossary that you can look at of definitions of terms. So if you want to find out what a thing is in Java, you can look at, or in Android, you can say, well, what's a button? And there's a whole article and explaining what the definition of a button is. Or if you go look for, I think widget is one of the interesting ones. Widget. And do they not have a definition for it? Okay, they don't have a definition for widget. Which is interesting. Okay. Because widgets have more than one definition in the Android world. There's also the developer training website. This has some kind of guided training related to Android and different things. So I think that that's actually one of the ones that this is actually what we're doing here is Android Developer Fundamentals in Java. That's the course that we're taking of that.
Well, I see Kotlin a lot.
Uh-huh.
What is that? Is it just another environment? Is everything working it?
So Kotlin is a different language. It compiles down to Java bytecode. So Kotlin still runs on the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine. Same way with actually Groovy. Groovy also compiles down to the Java bytecode. So technically you can run any program that's, basically if you're going to write a program in Java, you actually have three options. You can write it in Java, you can write it in Groovy, or you can write it in Kotlin in general. And they're just three different languages to do the same thing with different syntaxes.
I remember reading something and depending on the language you're a developer in, that Kotlin's the most highly paid.
Yes.
I don't know if that's any truth. Yeah, why is that? Is it just really
There's some truth to that. So Kotlin is it's very new. Kotlin has only become kind of popular in the last 5 years. So it's a much younger language, and as far as I know, Kotlin is basically only used on Android. and nowhere else. It is a much nicer language from everything I hear. There's a lot of improvements that they made over Java in Kotlin. But the problem is that yes, there's some desire there, and the way things are going is applications that are being developed specifically for Android are shifting to Kotlin development over Java development. The catch is with the industry as it is in St. Louis and country-wise, there's just a lot more job opportunities right now for Java than they are for Kotlin. So that what you're seeing there is yes, most of the Kotlin jobs are paid higher, but that's because they're largely filled by senior level developers. There's not a lot of entry level jobs in Kotlin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's really biased by that. There's a lot of more mid-level and entry-level jobs in Java, so that there's the averages are not skewed towards high-level developers. So that's where you might see an average salary for Java is maybe 60,000, and an average salary for Kotlin is 100,000. That's really just because the population of people that are in those jobs are at a different skill level. So again, the people that are doing Kotlin development are largely senior developers, and the people that are doing Java are much more all across the spectrum. So the averages can be deceiving anytime you're looking at the average pay for a particular technology or language. You have to realize that sometimes they just skew more towards certain kinds of people. So that Kotlin is one of those things that we've talked about as far as should we change the curriculum. We've talked about that a time or two. And where we've landed at the moment is that we're staying with Java because that's where you're more likely to find a job in Java around our area than Kotlin. Yeah, there are a lot of things trying to replace Java, and for good reason. I think Java at this point is not my favorite language. It's definitely one of my actually least favorite languages. It's probably one step above C. It's one step above C++, but not by much. And
what's your favorite?
My favorite now actually is Node, is JavaScript, which I never saw myself doing that, but Node and JavaScript are definitely my preferred languages today. I'd say that Python's probably my second option in there, although I haven't really done much Python. So there is a link here to get all of the source code for the code labs. Obviously, this is a little bit dated. You'll notice that all of these are 4 years old. So even to just run it on Android Studio, you may have to apply some updates or download some additional things as soon as you open it. But technically, all the code for these completed for the code labs is actually available online. So that is out there. Which also means that my intent is to add some more labs in there for you to do, just because there's a limit to how much you can learn from just doing the code labs. So general tips they give you for going through the practicals: make sure you complete every practical. Make sure you spend time studying the corresponding concepts. A lot of that has to do with just reading the textbook, and try to complete the challenges that go with the code lab. Generally speaking, the challenges are not necessarily to do future code labs, but doing the code lab itself, often there's multiple code labs that build on a previous code lab and add additional functionality to it, which is actually one of the things that we're going to do today, is we're going to build on one of the labs we've already started. Okay. So that's kind of the gist of what's there. The big takeaway is that there are a lot of resources available, but the main hub of all your information is going to be developer.android.com. Questions?
Nope.
Okay. All right. So we're sitting at 133. So what we're going to get into, there's 3 things that we're going to go over today. We're going to go over how to create a launcher icon and add that to any of your applications. That'll be an expectation for a lot of your labs going forward, and especially for sure anything I give it as a hands-on test, I would expect you to add a launcher icon for it as well. It's not terribly hard. A lot of stuff is basically you can use some icons that are already built into Android Studio. So you can actually make an icon without ever leaving Android Studio. You don't have to go pull up an image editor most of the time if you just want to use one of the icons. So we'll go over that. We'll talk a little bit about some of the project templates. Namely, we'll look at the basic activity template for a little bit. And then we'll look at where you can get some of the code samples that are available. I've had kind of mixed luck from that, so your mileage may vary. And that's also more something that would be relevant once you kind of graduate and move on. Looking at the code samples, or a lot of those are for more advanced stuff than what we're going to cover this semester. So that's kind of what we'll look at today, is launcher icons, project templates, or activity templates, and then sample code. Okay? Any questions? Everybody good for a break?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a break here. We'll come back at 1:50.
Sweet.
Sounds good.
welcome back, everybody. Ready to get going with this lab?
I'm ready.
Okay. So first things first, we're going to base this off of a lab that we've already started. So what you want to do is open up your repository on your disk. I'm not going to get into Android Studio yet. So open up your folder. What you're going to do is go into 1.2. Okay, 1.2, not the one we did yesterday. So, but under 1.2, you should have Hello Toast. Okay, so make a copy of Hello Toast, and we're going to paste that. We're going to paste that into 1.4. So make a copy of whatever you have in 1.2, and paste that then into 1.4.
Yeah, I got a big question. It says
Yep.
hello toast, and then we eventually turned it into like boom. It was just like
I just changed.
hello
We just
boom
changed
is
the
not,
text.
I guess.
Yeah, we just changed the text. That was it. Just the string. Okay. So has everybody got that? Everybody with me there?
Yep.
So you should have one copy of the project in 1.2 and another copy of 1.4. Same project, but obviously, please don't delete the one you have in 1.2. Okay, so now I'm going to open up this project. I'm going to open that up in Android Studio because we're gonna start with that project. Okay, so I'm going to go open an existing project, and here's where I'm going to pick that project that we already have. So I need to go into the right folder, Unit 1, Paul Smith KC, 1.4, Hello Toast. So under 1.4, I've got Hello Toast. I'm going to open that one. Oh, I need to let it finish loading. Okay, so all of our code should be there. Eventually, when it finishes building, it should switch over to Android. So I can try to go ahead and run this program as is here on my device. Okay, so the program comes up. I'm going to go ahead and click the square, and I'm going to close that program. So one thing you may want to do as you're kind of building your programs and working on things, if I go pull up here, you'll actually see that I have several programs in here, and that is these different applications that we've built and installed. So they're actually installed either on, if you're running on the physical device, you'll see the icon there in your drawer. If you're running on the emulator, you'll see it there is installed. And actually, it will stay installed until you uninstall it. So I've got actually two versions of Hello Toast there, and I'm not really sure which one I have, which one we're working from here. So I'm actually going to go ahead and just uninstall both of those. So
where did you go for that?
So I pulled up, and then I just hold it and drag it, and you see there's an uninstall option. Do you got that?
Yeah.
So I'm going to uninstall both of those.
I can't get to home. Everything else is working, but home's the home button, the physical key there in the bottom doesn't work.
I think on the API 30, none of these hardware buttons are working for me. If I try it on API 21, then all of these buttons work, but none of these seem to work in API 30 for me.
How'd you get to home? Did you switch to 21?
I am on 30 right now. So what I'm doing is there's the buttons here on the side. So you've got like the square, the circle, and the back. I'm using those. So if you go to here, circle in modern devices is equivalent to home.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm using circle for home and square to show the running applications.
Okay. So just delete hello.
Yeah, just uninstall Hello Toast, and then I'm going to run it again. So that way I know I'll only have one version of this installed. So it's up and running there. And in fact, if I hit the square, you'll see it running. Do you see this little circle, the green circle up at the top? That is actually the application icon. That's the same as the launcher icon. So that's one of the places that you'll see the launcher icon appear. Obviously, as you would expect, it also appears in the drawer here. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this out and put it on my home screen. So I have kind of a list of the apps that we've built so far. So that's the current icon, the default icon for any new apps that you create. Okay, everybody with me so far? So that's the icon right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that icon. We're going to come up with our own icon. Okay, so going back to Android Studio, I'm going to expand Res. I'm going to look here. I kind of mentioned that you'll find images. You'll find images both under Drawable, and you'll find images under Bitmap. Okay, so if we look at what's there right now, and you'll also notice what's in colors. If I look at, say, under Drawable, you'll see that there's this green sort of hash, green sort of grid. So that's basically this is being used as the background of your icon. So everybody see that?
Yeah.
Now you'll notice it's an XML file, right? It's an XML file, which means it's actually, this is an SVG file. It's a vector image. So inside of here is not the pixels for this image, but actually the instructions for how to draw it. If you look in here, you'll actually see the instructions for how this grid is drawn. Okay, so that's where you're seeing an XML file there, and not, say, a PNG. So under Drawable, there's two resources there. There's the background, and there's also the foreground, and you'll see that's an SVG as well. Okay, now if I go down into Bitmap, you'll see there's a bunch of additional resources. So for instance, under IC Launcher, you'll see that there's a bunch of PNGs, all of different sizes. So you've got high DPI, medium DPI, extra high DPI, extra high DPI, extra high DPI. All of those X's are extra. It's unfortunate that they went with that naming scheme because, well, 3 X's and then an H. That's not the easiest thing to naming scheme to keep track of. So there's a bunch of different PNGs, and basically you can see they just are different sizes. Because different devices have different screen resolutions, so they need more pixels to render things. So there's a bunch of versions of the icons. These are all the square icons, as you can see. All of those versions are square. There's also an XML file down here as well, and that's a vector version. So you've got the PNGs, which actually contain, pixel data is a pixel version, and those are for kind of older versions of Android. Newer versions of Android, and you can kind of see here any DPI, as long as it's version 26 or higher, it's using the XML instead. Everybody see that? So that's what comes pre-packaged, right? So there's a square version of the launcher icon, and this launcher icon is just those two things put together, these two XML files put together. There's also a round version in a similar sort of fashion. You can see these are all at different resolutions. And then finally, there's an XML file, XML version of that. Okay, so the modern way, if you're supporting, newer devices, API 26 and higher, it's actually better to use XML files like this rather than delivering all of these PNGs. But since we're supporting 21 and higher, we'll still need to have some actual image files here to support older devices. Okay.
Hey, Mr. Smith, one quick thing. It worked the first time, and now it doesn't work anymore. Trying to drag the icon to the home screen, I just can't. I can open but not drag anything. I just tried restarting the emulator, and no dice.
What do you mean open but not drag anything?
Well, you know how you can uninstall it?
Yes.
That action, whatever you call that.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't do that anymore. And I tried restarting the emulator.
One thing that's worth noting, if you drag it from the home screen, you may get a different option here instead of uninstall. If you want to uninstall it, you typically have to do it from the drawer and go to uninstall.
Okay, yeah, I was able to do that. Now I cannot drag to uninstall or put on the home screen or do whatever. It just doesn't work.
I don't know what's happening for you then.
Do you maybe still have the app open?
Yeah, it is open, but it shouldn't matter.
Make sure you click and hold and then drag.
Yeah, I did that. It worked instantly the first time. I mean, it's very intuitive. Now it's nothing.
Yeah. I don't think you have to stop the application in order to uninstall it or to move the launcher icon around.
Yeah.
So I just know that a lot of versions of Android, dragging it from the home screen, typically this trash can becomes just remove it from the home screen. It's usually not uninstall it. So like if I were to try this on API 21, you are going to see a different behavior. So which version of Android are you running against?
Using 30.
You're using 30 and you're on the emulator?
Yep.
Okay. Then it should work exactly the same way mine is. Okay. Anyway, so what we want to do is we want to replace that icon. The way we do that is very simple, but there is a bug actually in Android Studio with how it creates that icon. In that, if you tell it to just add an icon, it actually doesn't delete one of the resource. It doesn't delete any of the existing resources. It just slaps stuff on top. Which unfortunately that means if you just add an icon and stop there, your program will stop building. Okay, so that's not great. Okay, so before we add the icon, what I actually want to do is delete the old icon. So under drawable, I'm going to delete both the foreground and the background. I'm going to tell that to delete anyway. And same way under map, I'm going to delete both of these. And say delete anyway. So you should have nothing in your map folder and nothing in your drawable folder.
Okay. Oh, so we're getting rid of the entire IC launcher and the launcher round.
Yep. Get rid of all the icons that are already there.
Wait, how did you select it all? Sorry.
I just hold shift. You can either use shift or you can use control. So like if I want to select two things here, I can do shift like that, or I can do control to highlight multiple files at once.
You say safe delete. Sorry, I just spilled a coffee all over my table. Oh, crisis here.
Yeah. What you want to say is delete anyway. It'll warn you that those are still in use. You just got to tell it to delete anyway. Okay. Any other questions there?
Do we do the safe delete or do we uncheck those? Sorry.
You can leave it checked. The one thing to do, obviously, don't delete the entire map folder or the entire drawable folder, just the stuff that's inside of it. So now you shouldn't have an icon, and in fact, if you try to run the program now, it won't actually run anymore because there has to be an icon. But that's okay. And so if you're looking in the manifest, you'll see that the manifest still has a reference, still holds a reference to both of those icons. You can see at MipMap Launcher or at MipMap Launcher Round. That's okay. We're going to fix that here in a moment. You don't need to remove that code because we'll add the new icon and it'll have the same name.
Mine's still working.
Okay.
The reason why we just deleted all the drawable and
all of it. It'll still be just fine on your emulator.
Okay.
But if you hit run, you should see an error like this.
Okay.
If you don't see an error like that, you probably haven't deleted all the files. So make sure you get rid of everything inside of MipMap and everything inside of Drawable.
Okay, I'm good now.
Okay. So we're going to now create a new icon. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to right-click on, right-click on Res, and go to New. And if you look in here, there's a few different icons, a few different things you can pick. So for instance, there's image assets, there's vector assets. Let me go back in. I feel like there's another. Another one I'm looking for. Yeah, so I'm going to just do it that way. So I'm going to right click on Res, I'm going to say New, and I'm going to say Image Asset. This is on the resource folder. Okay. And so actually pre-selected in here, it will say, well, what kind of icon do you want? So we're going to create a new image asset. By default, it's starting at launcher icons, and that's actually what we want it to be. You'll notice in that drop-down, there's adaptive and legacy or legacy only. So if you select legacy only, what it's going to do is it's just going to create those PNG files and not the XML files. If you say adaptive and legacy, it will create both the XML files for you and the PNGs. So that's always going to be what you want. Always pick adaptive and legacy. Okay. The name of this is now IC Launcher. That's the name. IC short for icon. That's the name of what your launcher icon should be. Just leave that as is. When later on in the course, we'll add more icons using this interface, and at that point we'll name those icons something else. But your launcher icon still needs to be called IC_launcher. Okay. So then you'll kind of remember when we were looking at the resources, we saw that there's a foreground file as well as a background file. And those can be different. So for instance, if we want to go to the foreground layer, let's say we want for a foreground layer, let's use a image. So I'm going to go to clip art. So I'm going to use one of the icons that's built in. So foreground clip art. And then you see the button here labeled clip art.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to click on that. It's going to pop up with the list of all of the icons that are already available. So these are all material icons that Google has produced and made freely available. That's a good starting point. Realistically, if you're building your own app, you should come up with your own icon. But using these prepackaged icons will be good enough for us in this course. So what I want you to do is just go ahead and pick any icon in there. It really doesn't matter what you pick. So I'm going to say, well, I'm just going to pick the little snowflake there. You can pick any icon you want. You don't have to pick the same one as me. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that. And then we can also change the color of that foreground image. So here I've got a snowflake. Maybe I'll make it white. There, white. So I can kind of change it in hexadecimal. I can change it in RGB. I can move it around here. But I'm just going to pick a white as my foreground color. Okay, so that's the foreground in place. You just pick an icon and you pick what color you want that icon to be, and you can kind of see it's coming up and previewing all these different versions. So a circle, kind of a mix between a square and a circle, rounded circle, square, legacy icons, rounded icons. So it is actually going to generate all of those icons for us. Now, the next thing we want to do, we've kind of fixed the foreground. I want to go back to the background and pick a color here. So I just want it to be a solid color. And same thing, I can kind of pick that from a color wheel. So maybe I'll go with like a little blue today. There. So you can basically pick an icon for the foreground and a color for the background, and that gives you a good starting point for an icon. You'll also know that there's preview here, so you can kind of see, well, what's it going to look like on maybe look at the different DPIs. I generally just leave that on XHDPI and preview it that way. So that's basically it. In terms of creating a launcher icon, you just need to set the foreground and set the background. Once we're done there, go ahead and hit next. It's going to give you a preview of all of the files that it's going to add. So for instance, you can see that it's going to go into here. There's this launcher icon Play Store. So it's actually creating a icon that you can use in the Play Store, because that needs to be a different size. So it's 512 by 512. You can see there's an XML file here that's going to create under drawable for the foreground. Under values, it's going to create a file named IC Launcher Background XML, which is kind of interesting because, well, the background is just a solid color. So it's actually putting it over in values. It's not putting it over in drawable or bitmap. And then you can see under bitmap, it's creating all these different files, as we kind of saw were already there. So now that we've got that good, and that just gives you a preview for what's going to be created, let's hit finish. It's going to ask if we want to add some of these files. I can just say add and add again, because there's all those files it's creating. So if we look under drawable now, you should have this IC Launcher foreground. So that should be the icon that you picked and the color that you picked. You should see under values, there's just a single color value, which is my background color. And then back under bitmap, there's all these different icons there.
When I opened the foreground, it asked me if I wanted to add it to Git.
Yeah. You can just say yes. You can just say add it.
Is that going to happen for all the new files?
It may. It's not giving me that for the other files. In the end, it really doesn't matter, because once we commit it, we're just going to commit everything. So whether you click add or don't click add, it actually really doesn't matter. So that's it. So you delete the existing icon, delete all the resources for it, create the new one, and now we can hit run, and it should be using the new icon. So for instance, I can hit square and I can see it right there above, or if I go to the home screen, you can see my new icon.
That might be the easiest thing we've done.
Yeah, it's not too terribly hard. If you remember to delete the old icon before, then it's a lot easier to work out. The biggest trouble that I have if I don't delete the old icon, it still keeps the old background here, so you end up with two background resources. So that's why I delete the icon first, so I don't end up with two copies of background. Okay, so if you've got that all running, let's go ahead and commit that. I want to do a commit here. And so we're going to say, this is my launcher icon. And commit. And we did actually find some investigation. I think you had noticed this, Paul, but if you go under VCS version control system, go to Git, there's the push button. Why it's not on the toolbar, I don't understand.
When you're committing, if you click on the down arrow next to the commit, there's an option for commit push.
You can, but you can only do that if you remember to do it.
Yeah.
Right? If you accidentally hit commit, then you've lost it. Right? So that's the reason I mentioned this.
Gotcha.
Is it's very easy to misclick on that. So I'm going to just go here and do that. Yes, if you remember to do it, then obviously that is faster, but sometimes you forget to hit push. So we're going to go in there and I'll push all those code, push all that up. So that's how you make a launcher icon. So that's step 1. Any questions? Any questions at all? Okay. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to look a little bit about some of the templates that are available. So what I want to do is the activity template. So we're going to actually add a second activity to this project. So you'll kind of see right now under layout, we have these 3 different variants for activity main. I'm going to create a brand new activity, but I'm going to do it up here. So the way to create an activity, you don't click on the layout, you don't click down here on the resources, you're going to click on the code up here, and we're going to say new. So up here on this package, Hello Toast, I'm going to say new, and we're going to go down to activity. Okay, and you can't actually pick it directly from here. So if I would say I want a new empty activity, I could click there. If I want a basic activity, I could click here. I'm going to go click gallery, and that'll give me this sort of view, so I can get kind of a preview of what those different templates look like. So if everybody got this window open, new Android activity?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So you're going to see a preview of what's all available right there. So far we've started all of our apps with this empty activity. But you can see that there's a bunch of other options that you can use as a starting point. Now, you can always continue using basic empty activity. That's perfectly fine. It's always okay to do that. The benefit that these other ones provide is it sets some things up already without you having to go in and do that work. So for instance, there's one that already includes a scroll view that you can get just by doing scrolling activity right there. So there's a few different ones, or if you want a login screen, well, there's a starting point for a login screen. If you need it to occupy the full screen, like you might do for maybe a video player, then you, or a game, you might start there. So the one I want to look at today, and this is the only one we're going to look at today, is just basic activity. So I'm going to create a new activity, but I'm going to start with the basic activity template. Okay. So here, let's call this one, we've got main activity already, so I'm going to call this one second activity. So I'm going to say create that as second activity is the name of the activity. It's going to automatically change the name of the layout, so it's going to be activity underscore second. So typically when we're naming our layouts, that's kind of the naming convention we follow, is we start with what kind of layout is it, followed by kind of the name of the screen. So that's where you're going to see activity main, activity second. Part of the reason that we do that is it tends to sort things kind of by what kind of thing they are. So we're going to see later on, we're going to have things like content second, content main, item product, things like that. So we're going to have different prefixes in there as well, and that's going to help to kind of keep things organized. So that's what we have. So second activity is the name of it. I also can potentially change and put if I want to put a space in there, you'll notice I can't put a space into this first field. I get an error because that first field actually needs to be a valid class name. So what I can do though, however, I can't put spaces in there because that's a Java class name. I can put a space down here. If I wanted to say, well, this will be the title that will appear in the kind of the toolbar at the top. So I might change this to second as just the title. So we got second activity, activity second, and second. There is a checkbox here for launcher activity. Don't check that. You can only ever really have practically one launcher activity, or you really only should have one. Here it does potentially let you add more, and you might do that if you're going to create a new launcher activity and then delete the existing one. But typically you only want to have one launcher activity. That's the one that your application starts on, is the launcher activity. So if you have two, then when the user starts your app, it says, well, which one do you want to start into? Activity A or activity B? And that's usually not what you want. So everybody got this? The starting point, all these three fields configured?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's hit finish. And this is going to add a few things. So you can kind of see in the dialog that it's adding quite a few classes. And this actually has changed from what it was last year when I taught this same course. Just last year, adding basic activity did something different. They've actually changed the template, which, for better or for worse, the new template is much more complicated than the old one was. So you can see what it's adding to this program. It's going to add this first fragment class, the second fragment class, second activity, and it's adding one activity class and these two fragments. Fragments are sort of sub-activities or mini activities that you can kind of put inside of a larger activity, and kind of think of them as partials. We'll talk about those later. Those are definitely an advanced concept, but those are being added in there. And then we've got some layouts. So for instance, we have activity second is the overarching layout for this. We've got content second, which is actually kind of still part of the activity, but nested inside of that. We'll see that here in a minute. And there's a layout also then for each of those fragments. Okay. Then finally, there's like navigation. It's adding a navigation file, and it's also adding a dimens file. So there's quite a bit of code that it's adding just by adding a basic activity. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and hit add. Whether I hit add or not, those files will still be added to my project. And then we can kind of see some of the stuff that's here. So we have main activity, we have second activity. Second activity has a little bit of code in there. I don't really want to go into what that code is right now or what it does. We'll talk about that in a later lesson. Activity second, if I go look at the layout here, you can kind of get a preview as to what it's going to look like. So you can kind of see that there's a toolbar. There's this little button down here. We call that a FAB or floating action button. If I go down to content second, it'll kind of look like this. And it's actually not showing me. It's actually not showing me the FAB there, which it should be. That's definitely a bug. You've got kind of the fragment for the first. So first activity has got a label, it's got a button. Fragment second got a button and a label. So you can kind of see what all this did is added quite a bit of different pieces just for that one additional activity. Okay. So as we get further in, we're going to be adding some more activities, and you can kind of see, this is one way that you can get some example code of things that are available there kind of out of the box, is just by adding an activity with whatever template that comes with some code baked in. Okay. Now, what I want to do, I'm actually going to undo the add of all of that stuff. I'm going to remove the main activity. So I want to get back to where I was. So I'm actually going to go, given that I committed all my code before adding it, I'm just going to go to the VCS and I'm going to undo those changes.
Are we following you with this?
Yeah, if you added the activity, you can go ahead and undo that. So I think I can go to, let me see, what do I want to do? I don't think revert is the right one. Let me look at that. Oh, yeah, revert is the one I want. So if you go to VCS, go to Git, go to rollback, and then you can check everything, and this should undo all of the changes that it just made. So we're going to say rollback to get back to where it was. Now, that did not actually undo everything, because I still see second activity in the manifest, and I still see all the files here. So let me just go back to TortoiseGit, because I know how to do this in TortoiseGit. I'm going to right-click in here on the 1.4 Hello Toast. So we're going to say go to TortoiseGit and go to revert. That is listing it as empty. So what I actually want to do then is go to Git and go to cleanup, and that's going to remove everything that's there. Now, let me close and reopen, because that was not very happy with me for cleaning all that up. So, unfortunately, undoing an activity add, especially with all the code that it's bringing in there, is sometimes not the easiest thing. Is my project going to come back, or is it hosed? No elephantiucon. I might have just broken it.
Mr. Smith, if
Yeah.
you back out one more time and then reload it again, mine finally popped up. I don't know if yours will.
Yeah. It looks like it even deleted my Java code in there. So mine's not in a good vote. Go. Let me go to TortoiseGit and
I actually
revert.
shut down Android Studio before I popped mine back up.
Yeah, and I should have done that. Ooh. Okay. TortoiseGit show log. Added that. Oh, okay. Did my code ever get committed? No, it never actually added my code. Well, that's interesting. So when I committed that first time, it never actually committed the main part of my application. Well, that's great. So I'm going to have to copy 1.2 again and paste it here. And skip these files. Because it looks like when I initially committed, it didn't actually commit everything. Which is why I don't have my code anymore. Okay, so now it's back, and I probably just need to do some cleanup. Yep, I just need to clean it up because I have multiple files now. So I have my launcher background still left over from the old one. I need to delete that. And that's my new foreground. That's my old foreground. Let's delete that. Nope. Old icon. Okay. So my whole problem is that I didn't actually commit all the stuff. When we added the icon, I didn't commit everything. So it broke, and so I had to get all those files back. So let's go and commit now. And I need to make sure, and I don't think I clicked that the first time. I don't think I clicked on version files is my problem. Now I'm back to just having that one there. So now that I've kind of rolled that back, what I want to do is actually just create a new project, because that will go ahead and make that basic activity as kind of the launcher. So I'm going to say File, New Project. So rather than creating it, yep.
So when we rolled back, we're not doing anything after that then with that project?
Yeah, we're done. We're done. I just wanted to get back to the point where we were after we added the icon.
Were you just like showing us how to delete an activity or something?
Yeah, I was basically trying to show you how to undo it, but of course I goofed the whole thing up. So, and I was forgetting, I was thinking that I would get a different result if I added an activity then. I created the new project because I remember seeing that as I was testing before the semester.
I mean, bright side of it all, at least we get to see how to fix it if we ever encounter this situation.
You're probably going to encounter the situation. Just saying, it's so easy to goof things up. So I'm going to create a new project. We're going to start it off with basic activity. I'm going to just call this. Yep.
Can you maybe pause for a second? Because I did what you did, but I have no idea how you fix it. So I just deleted it, and I have to fix the icons now. Unless you just want me to skip over that part again.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is if it all got goofed up with the where it's at, is to just delete the folder in 1.4 and start back from the beginning and copy the folder from 1.2 over.
Yeah, so do you just want me to go from where we are now, or do you want me to redo the icon? Because now the icon's gone that we just did.
You can redo the icon after we're done with lecture.
Okay.
So, because we're switching over to another project, and so nothing we do today will depend on having that icon there. So I'm going to create a new project is where I was at. I'm going to start with basic activity. We're going to go next. I'm going to call this new application basic activity. And I'm going to put this under the 1.4 folder. So 1.4 basic activity. Okay?
My screen was lagging out on there. How did you get to that again? You just said create new project.
Yeah, so this is a new project, not a new activity.
Okay.
Rather than trying to wire up some code to get here, I'd like to kind of show how that runs. So I'm going to hit finish here, and that should start up creating the new project. Okay, so now I've got a new project. It's just got this one main activity, but that main activity is based on basic activity instead of being based on the empty activity. And what I'm going to do is just run this here. There. So now that I've created it with basic activity and put it on the device, kind of everybody looking at my screen here a minute.
Yes.
So what I just want to show you is kind of what this gives you. So here's it's kind of on this basic activity. As I said, it's kind of got these fragments or mini activity in here. If you click next, it's going on to that second fragment back and forth. And it's got this icon, replace, it's kind of just a placeholder tooltip that pops up when you do there. You'll also see that in the top, there's the triple dot to bring up this kind of pop up, this menu, as we call it. So it's got a placeholder for kind of putting a setting screen in there. So if you start with a basic activity, it already goes and wires up, as you can see, a lot of things. And this is the same case with a lot of these activity templates. So that can be a way to kind of get some idea of how certain things function. Is sometimes you can just create a simple app with a different template, and you can kind of play around with those new features. So that's all I wanted to look at here. We're not actually going to change any of the code on this today. We'll look at basic activity more in depth in future weeks. But that can help you get some kind of idea of what's out there, play around with it, because it basically comes with some sample code. Okay, so let's now, the next thing to do is to look at what we call the code samples. And I think, Daniel, you kind of mentioned on this that the link in the reading material is points doesn't work anymore for the samples. Yeah, it's moved a few times. So the way to get to it, if I go File and New, you'll see there's an import sample. Import sample ... Let's pop that open. And this is going to be the way that you're going to get to all of the sample activities, all the sample things that are available. So you can see there's a bunch of different categories of examples. So there's like animation examples, bundling, architecture, one for camera. So there's a bunch of different examples here that you can get to try out a bunch of different features in Android. This falls into the area of these things are not going to be probably honestly all that helpful for you as a student. I would say that they're much more they're much better as tools for professional developers to kind of see a working project and then integrate some of that code into their existing project. So you can look at them. They're decent references, but they're probably, for most part, most of these are kind of beyond the scope of what we'll talk about here. The other kind of gotcha is that I've had kind of mixed experience with these samples. Sometimes they just work out of the box, and sometimes I can't get them running at all. So take that with a grain of salt. Like there's some useful things here, but they may or may not work for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick under animation, I'm going to go to basic transition, and I'm just going to pull up that sample. Or was it? No, I wanted activity scene transition basic. I want that first one. So I'm going to pull that one up, and I'm going to say next. It's going to give me an option for what to call that. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm just going to make sure that ends up in the 1.4 folder. Okay.
How did you get to the samples again?
So the way to get to the samples, File, New, Import Sample. File, New, Import Sample.
Okay.
And so I'm going to pick the very top one under Animation, Activity Scene Transition Basic. Going to hit Next. And let's say Finish. So these samples can be pretty large, these sample projects, so it may take a little bit of time to load. Just, obviously give it time to finish working. All right, so that stops spinning. Oh, nope, it's spinning again. We can see that it's kind of pulled down, and there's a few different classes available here for this. If I go run it on a device, let's say I go run it on the 10-inch tablet, is what I'm going to try this one on. It'll take a minute to load on up. So this example pulls up. You kind of see there's a few different like pictures, kind of like a gallery almost. So if I click on one of those, say click Flamingo, you can see it kind of does this transition from making the image small to making it bigger. And if I go back, it shrinks it down. So there's a lot of things like this that you can kind of see a working application. And then kind of learn some things from that. Cool?
Yeah, but you got to be careful because some of it's outdated or useless, right?
Yeah. So take all of these samples with a grain of salt. But that can be a good place for you to look if you're kind of curious or want to know more about what's out there and some of the features in Android. Especially beyond, a lot of these, again, are kind of beyond what we'll cover in this course. But that's really all I wanted to show you here with that, is just where to find it. That's it. That's, if you want to get one of the samples, that's where you're going to go to get the code, is File, New, Import Sample. And so that's the gist of it.
That's pretty neat.
So that's all for today. That's all that was on the labs, is just those three things, and to just look at the resources that are available. So it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing major. They're just kind of showing you, hey, here's where you can find some of the documentation and other reference material. That's all that this chapter is about.
All right. So the only deliverable was we got the reading, the perusal stuff,
Yeah.
and then we got the homework quiz.
Yep.
But as far as attendance and turning in a project, we're done. Yeah. If we
Yeah,
did
all you needed to do for attendance wise is just take your Hello constraint, your Hello Toast app, and add the launcher icon. That's it. That's all I'm looking for.
All right.
Okay, and then this weekend is just do the peruse all readings and the homework that's due for
Yep.
Sunday.
Yep. So if you look on Inside Ranken, there'll be there's a quiz there that I recommend you just go ahead and do now. As far as the homework's concerned, just go do homework 1. Homework questions 1, and that shouldn't take you more than a few minutes to go on through that.
Oh, there's only one homework questions today. I was looking at it, and to me, it just looked like there was like 3 different sets because I figured like 1 per lesson.
There is 1 per lesson. So if you go look at preview tests, so there's actually 4 pages.
Oh, got it.
So the first page, which is just 4 questions, is lesson 1.1. And then you've got lesson 2, lesson 1.3, lesson 1.4.
So they're matched with our lab.
There's only 3 questions for today. That's it.
Wait, there's only 3 questions today, not the whole quiz?
Right. No, sorry. I misspoke. Do the whole quiz. The whole quiz is 14 questions. What I'm saying is there's 3 questions from today.
Okay, gotcha.
Right. So as far as what we talked about today, these are the only 3 questions on the content from today. So.
Whoa, we got a set like 75% less.
Mm-hmm.
The last one was 62. Yeah, was that right?
Yeah. These are going to be pretty short. I think they're all about 15, 20 questions.
So we're in the eye of the storm here. We're going to get walloped in the next couple of weeks.
Up and down. I'd say that, obviously, as I've kind of mentioned, Unit 2 is kind of the biggest part of this course. So we'll dive into a lot of stuff, and we'll cover lessons. Unit 2 moves pretty fast. So, and I think we start that in it's February or March as we get into. Yeah, so starting kind of the second week of February is where we're going to get into the meat of the course.
Okay.
Whenever I was downloading this stuff, I got a pop-up that said Android Gradle plugin is ready to update. I don't know if that's like linked to the Android Studio update.
Yes and no. So if I
could just close it. I just didn't know if that was something you wanted us to look into.
I would probably say no. The gotcha is that there's 2 dialogues, there's 2 pop-ups that look almost identical, and if you're not paying close attention, you can easily misclick and click the wrong one. So there's one pop-up that you'll get down there that will say, hey, there's a new version of Android Studio available, which there actually already is.
I have seen that, yeah.
Yeah. So if there's already I think it was a 4.1.2 that popped up for me the other day. So there's an update there. There's that other pop-up that will pop up if it's running on an older version, which I think that's the one you saw. In this case, it's because this project, the sample, was built off of Android Studio 3.5.0. So when it's telling you to upgrade the Gradle plugin, what it actually means is that it can update this project from 3.50 to 4.1.1.
So just don't touch any updates then.
I would just avoid it. Yeah. Because it's trying to be helpful, but the problem is that I've had students in the past who have accidentally clicked that because they were used to updating all their projects to 4.1.1, and then all of a sudden they accidentally click the one that updated Android Studio.
Yeah, because I got it in the README for the
Yeah.
the transitions, so I think it's like something to do with the files.
Yeah, it's this, and so if you want to do that, you can manually do that. So if I open up the way that you do it without acknowledging the prompt is you go into here, and you say, well, this is telling you that it can be updated. So you could say, for instance, here I could say change to 4.12, and then I could tell it to then run. I just need to sync the Gradle.
You have 4.12?
I don't think I do, unless I misclicked. No, I'm still on 4.11.
Why did the light bulb give you the option to do that then?
That's a good question.
I figured it couldn't be more than what you got.
That's got to be a good question, because as soon as I update that, it says minimum supported Gradle versions 4.11. So it's, as soon as I go to 4.12, it said, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah, just a general comment about Android Studio, IntelliJ, Java compared to Node and Visual Studio Code. This is just rough around the edges. Like, it works like 90% of the time.
Yeah. It's Android Studio is not as resilient as Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is amazing, but Android Studio is kind of been hit and miss. So. And it's actually, I think what it's saying, minimum supported Gradle version 6.5, current version is 5.41. Oh, so it's got to change something additionally. So not just here, it says, well, fix Gradle wrapper and re-import. And if you acknowledge that prompt, probably the only thing it was going to do was change this to 4.11, and then your project would stop building because of the error that I just got. Which now it's gone and changed some of the wrapper files, which are other Gradle files, and now it should be back to running, maybe? Yeah. So that's the other kind of catch, is they've got some functionality to automatically update version numbers for you, but it's really hit and miss, has been my experiences. Sometimes it updates it properly, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay. So yeah, I would say generally if you get that pop-up to say update Gradle or whatever, I would usually ignore it. I would suggest leaving it alone.
And when we add the transition and basic activity, we don't have to add anything, just push it up there.
Just push it up there. All I want to show you is just where to find it.
Gotcha.
That's it. And you'll notice that one of the questions, the very first question is, well, in Android Studio, where do you go to import a sample? Right. Yeah, and for instance, what's there if you create a basic activity template, what's already provided. If you want to get the official documentation for Android developers, where do you need to go? So we touched on all three of those things today.
This launched a separate window when we did this basic activity, right? It's not in our original Hello Toast code.
Yeah, I ended up I created a separate project. You can either you can either do the first thing, which is add a basic activity to a project you've already started, or you can add a basic activity to a brand new project. It used to be last year the way that basic activity worked. It was practical and good to add it to a project you've already started. The way that they've changed basic activity and the way it works now, unfortunately, is more designed around starting a brand new project and doesn't work as well if you're adding it to an existing project.
Okay, so it's something separate. We just save it under 1.4 then.
Yeah, I would just save it under 1.4. So what I have now under 1.4 is I've actually got 3 projects. I've got Hello Toast, I've got Basic Activity, and I've got Activity Scene Transition.
Hey, I don't know where it saved mine, but it's not there. Okay.
You might check under 1.3.
So when we're pushing files up,
Yep.
the email that we get,
Uh-huh.
like I didn't change anything, but it still says I'm missing like half the stuff. I don't know if that's just
Okay. Let me pull it up and see. That's Corey.
because it was on my recent submit where I didn't change anything. It just says I'm still missing a whole bunch of stuff apparently.
Okay, so let's see what I have. Okay, so this is the one am I looking at the right one? This is what you're seeing, Corey?
No, the one that I just pushed like 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
It should be added transition files and new basic activity.
Oh, there, it still went to my junk folder. That's why.
So I don't know if like your node thing is looking for files that we're not touching or.
Yeah. So I want to look at that, and there we go. Okay. So here's the one. Added transition file activity. So what you're seeing in here is it's looking. First of all, yes, it's looking for specific names. So you have to spell it exactly as like scrolling text, for instance. So if it's spelled differently, then you're going to not see it marked in green.
Yeah, it could be. I think mine was spelled differently. Unless what we're missing. Oh, those are all the future files. Okay,
yes,
I see.
The rest is future files. So
I see.
Because you've named it scrolling test, not scrolling text. That's why it's not in green.
Is that going to count against me?
I would like you to name it what it says here. So
you just want me to rename it and push it back up?
Yeah, if you could, please rename it to what it shows there and push it back up. But yeah, all this stuff is future stuff. So you'll see that I've put already things in there all the way up to lesson 3.3, which we haven't gotten to yet.
So the ones that I talked to you the other day about, do you want me to rename them?
Yeah.
Just renaming the file is going to fix all that?
Yep.
You don't have to worry about anything in the code.
Yep. All you got to do is just rename the folder to scrolling text, and that will fix it. It will turn green. It's just the name of the folder. Part of the reason that that's there, kind of going forward to the thing I'm working forward to. In order for me to do some automated testing on your stuff, which I don't have in place yet, it needs to be named exactly the right thing. So historically, I haven't taken off any points for people naming the folders the wrong thing typically, except on hands-on tests. But that's something I would recommend starting to kind of getting in that habit of making sure your folders are named properly or as expected. Does that help? Does that answer the question, Corey?
Yeah, I got it fixed. I didn't think to connect the dots with the whole like 1.4 and all that stuff.
Yeah, so you're seeing lesson 2.1. So
yeah, that's what I was looking at.
That shouldn't be there yet anyway. It's you should have everything though up until 1.4.
Yeah.
So
it should be updated now. Mine's updated, so.
Yeah. So the only thing I really want you to pay attention to there is if something's missing, then that can be an indication that maybe something's missing that you needed to upload.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, if you're seeing that the source and the idea are there, but the two Gradle files are not there, well, that means they're not in version control, which means I'm not going to actually be able to open up if you have your source code but you don't have your Gradle files, then I won't actually be able to open it up in Android Studio. So, it's a quick check that you're not missing some major files. Which is part of what I'm getting to.
All right.
Okay.
Are we good to head off and work on the quizzes and reading stuff?
Absolutely. Any questions? I mean, I know the session was pretty short, but there's not too much here.
And you said you're going to go over like the grades and stuff next week.
Yeah, the grades and stuff next week. So, if you can, please come in on Tuesday, and we'll I want to try and go with everybody. I know that I won't necessarily, I may not be able to meet with everybody on Tuesday. So, if I don't get you on Tuesday, I'll try to get you on Thursday. But I do want to try and go over the Unit 1 labs, Unit 0 labs with everybody on a one-on-one basis.
Okay.
Daniel, does that answer anything with you? Because you were asking about the Unit 0 labs earlier.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on Tuesday.
Okay. Yeah, talk about more on Tuesday. I gave you the list and the clarifications out there, but yeah, we'll talk about it on Tuesday. So, all right. So I'll see you next week, or I'll be around here until 4:30. So message me if you have questions.
Got it.
Okay.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah, you too.
Same to you. Same to you.